Welcome to Biota Live. I'm Tom Barbley, and this is a continuation of the Biota podcast. For more information, go to biota.org/podcast. We have our first caller. I believe it's Bruce Damer.
Hello,
Bruce.
Tom.
Good to talk to you. It's been an awfully long time. How have things been?
It certainly has. Things have been pretty hectic. I'm now preparing for tomorrow night's Yuri's Night, a World Space Party, and we have a version of that happening at NASA Ames Research Center, and I'm going to be on stage at about 11 o'clock talking about near-Earth objects and asteroids and how they're the future of life, past and future.
Yes, I was listening to a podcast just a couple of days ago, The Future and You, actually, which a number of our listeners apparently listen to as well. And they were discussing your near-Earth, bringing in and mining in the gravitational pull. It was fascinating to hear a Damer idea reiterated by another. It's amazing stuff. We have our second caller.
Hello.
Hello, second caller. Is that Jeffrey?
It's Jeffrey. Hi.
Hi. So are you going to make your good news public, Jeffrey?
What, the Internet Archive?
Why not?
Sure. I'm working there now.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Which may give you a little bit of time to, a little bit of quality time, should I say, to work on the open source version of Gene Pool.
Not necessarily. I was kind of not working. I had a little bit more time beforehand, and now I have less time, but I'm still working hard at it. So, either way.
Does the project have a new name at all, or will it still be called Gene Pool?
Oh, it's still called Gene Pool right now.
Okay.
Although I'd like to make a few other pieces of it.
I had floated the name Dawkins Puddle for a period of time.
Dawkins Puddle.
But I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether that will catch on. But I'd put my vote in for Dawkins Puddle. Well, for you both, we had some news and notes. Am I right in assuming that Grey Thumb Silicon Valley is now Grey Thumb San Francisco for the near future?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what you guys have discussed since I last emailed you.
Is that correct, Bruce?
Oh, I'm assuming it'll be in a place that fits for sort of the initial group.
Right.
I will be up there on the 24th of April. I don't know if that's too soon for you, Jeffrey.
24th of April. Let me look at my schedule.
While you look up your schedule, Jeffrey, why don't I go through additional news and notes, and we can reconvene on Scott Schaefer's YouTube, which I think probably relates to Grey Thumb San Francisco as well. Well, Grey Thumb-related news. Actually, before I begin on the Grey Thumb-related news, Bruce, do you want to do next Friday as a kind of EvoGrid update discussion?
Certainly.
Next Friday, 8 p.m. Pacific then, folks. We are going to do an update on the EvoGrid project with Bruce. I'll try to get it for 90 minutes so we can really expand on it. Blog Talk Radio is currently telling me that an hour on Friday nights is all that we should be allocated. So next Friday, 8 p.m. Pacific, I believe it's the 18th of April, we will be discussing the EvoGrid. And there's been a lot of correspondence and a lot of new ideas that's kind of been flowing through mailing lists and discussions you've had with people, hasn't there, Bruce?
Oh, yeah, it's a lot to absorb, and I've got a lot to report.
Yeah. It looks like a pretty well a full-time task just keeping up with the mailing lists and the various ideas that are flying around.
It seems to have hit a nerve that this is maybe the time to do this kind of thing.
Definitely. Well, additional Grey Thumb-related news. Nothing from Grey Thumb London, however, there may be an informal get-together in London, and there may also be an informal get-together in Washington, D.C. I hear a number of Biota Live signers will be congregating in Washington, D.C. I don't have the exact dates, but I understand that Travis, Robert Rice, and Gerald DeYoung, together with Justin Lyon, will all be congregating on Washington, D.C. I was hoping to have one of those folks call in tonight so they could confirm the exact dates. Grey Thumb Boston, we gave out 20 Biota CDs, so if anyone from Grey Thumb Boston is listening in for the first time, or anyone else for that matter, the number to call in is 646-200-0640. And those CDs in Boston were a kind of test, a beta test with regards to handing out CDs at A-Life 11. We got the news this week that we have permission to hand out Biota CDs at A-Life 11, which will be wonderful. They're estimating about 250 people, but we'll probably get them 300. So the undergraduates at Southampton University, I think, in the UK, or I think it's at Southampton. I'm probably completely wrong. So from the last show, there was lots of feedback, and I was hoping that Justin would call in this evening, or that we could do a part 2 in either a chat form or another Biota Live. I kind of summarized the questions to 4 main questions, which I put back to Justin today. The questions were, could an open source, that is a true open source model, work for Simudyne? Justin, from his correspondence, said that that wasn't the case. It may just be his current thinking. The second question, what happens to the value of contributed intellectual property in the Simudyne model? That was something that we didn't explicitly discuss in the last podcast. The third question, how can you assess if you want to join, I guess Simudyne in this case, based on an opaque information model? How do the numbers of folks involved pollute the wealth generation model? These were all submitted by listeners. And the final one related to long-term research. If clients are paying for time and this creates the development priority, doesn't this preclude the generation of anything that will be long-term productive because the model isn't strategically designed for that kind of development? So as you can see, quite a bit of correspondence, and these are the ones that I was able to get permission to read out on this podcast. Additional news from listeners. Matt Powell sent me a link to a genetic programming book which is available online under the Creative Commons license. It will go in the show notes for this episode. So if you want to check out that, go to biota.org/podcast and you will see. And thanks very much to Matt Powell for submitting that link. It looks like a fascinating book. He also said that I should contact the folks that had put it together in the UK for participating in future Biota-related stuff, and I think that's a stellar idea, Matt. Thank you very much. From San Francisco, Scott Schaefer. Do either of you know Scott Schaefer?
I don't think I've met Scott, no.
He's been following Biota for quite a few years. He lives in a very picturesque part of San Francisco, what do you call them now? My mind's gone completely blank. The boats on the water area of San Francisco, the marina. Exquisite set of photos on Facebook of his accommodation. It looks highly conducive to designing artificial life-related stuff. He sent me a link with regards to some of his stuff that's on YouTube. I will put that in the show notes as well. So as you can see, we've had a number of folks corresponding in this week, some that want to be named and others that don't. But if you would like to submit a topic for Biota Live, please get in contact. Email me, tom@nobleape.com, and if we select a topic for the show, you could receive one of the following books: The Ancestor's Tale by Richard Dawkins, I Was by Steve Wozniak and Gina Smith, Ever Since Darwin by Stephen Jay Gould, and the Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy are all up for grabs. Now, Biota's long-term friend, Dr. Dave, has a thing on his podcast on Shrink Wrap Radio where if folks submit comments into iTunes, he will send them books, and I'm considering this as well. We received our first iTunes review, and as I corresponded with Gerald Young over the past couple of days, I realized that these iTunes reviews are done regionally, so folks listening in Europe and the UK and Australia and Asia and these kind of areas may not be able to see the first iTunes review. Kind of mixed review. Basically, the fellow said that I obviously showed a lot of passion and enthusiasm with regards to the topic. However, he was a little concerned with the audio quality, and I think when we decided to move to Blog Talk Radio, I kind of anticipated that the audio quality would take a bit of a hit. However, it's the quantity, not the audio quality, and the ability to have folks like Jeffrey and Bruce on calls, and folks like Justin and Robert Rice and Travis and all the folks that have contributed to Biota Live so far. So unfortunately, it was a bit of a swap for audio quality versus active participation. However, I would like to recommend that folks that are listening to this podcast and like this podcast, please write reviews in iTunes. It basically gives the folks at Apple the feedback that people are actually listening to this podcast and enjoying it. And I don't know, there's a little bit of mythos associated with this, but it probably will push the podcast further up some ranking and maybe give it an icon that folks can click on. Additional minor news, I've been communicating with the folks at Project Lifeboat, who folks who've been participating in the Biota mailing list and also the Grey Thumb mailing list may remember the A prize from probably 18 months ago now. The A prize is still ongoing. I think they've been able to generate about $28,000 worth of funding for the A prize. So I'm hoping to have someone or a group of people from the A prize potentially in a Biota chat, potentially on a future live. However, the ball's in their court with regards to that. I corresponded with them over the past day or so with regards to various components. The question this week is, where's the secret sauce? It's a discussion with regards to whether there can be proprietary models for artificial life that will move the artificial life community forward with regards to discussions and ideas. The topic was submitted by Adam Irimenko, who folks will remember from the first EvoGrid discussion from Grey Thumb, Boston. I'll read just a couple of paragraphs from Adam's email and then we can get started. For folks interested in calling in, the number is 646-200-0640. Adam writes, I used to wonder why people like Carl Sims and Stephen Wolfram were so unapproachable. It seems like the people doing real and mature things in the tech industry are almost impossible to talk to. We've tried to get folks like Carl to come and give talks at Grey Thumb to no avail, for example, despite the fact that his office is literally 2 or 3 blocks from where we meet in Cambridge. Likewise, the folks at Ecosystem and other artificial life complexity simulation-related companies in the Boston area. I don't really wonder anymore, since I've learnt that if you have even the tiniest amount of value attached to yourself, be it intellectual property, name recognition, a site that gets a lot of hits, or even a modicum of academic credibility, you have to be careful about what you say, who you associate with, and what you endorse. If you have anything of value, being totally open about it is like walking through a bad neighborhood dressed to the hilt. You're going to attract attention, and much of it is not going to be nice. So, from that, I had quite a bit of discussion with Adam about models of proprietary companies and, in this case, individuals attached to these companies, and why they wouldn't be communicating. And what was distilled from that correspondence was an idea of the secret sauce. Now, I spelled it S-A-U-C-E. However, it could have been equally spelt S-O-U-R-C-E. But in this case, it relates to proprietary models with regards to artificial life, whether the secret source already exists, and folks like Carl Sims or Stephen Wolfram have had access to the secret source, or whether the secret source will exist in the future. So, Bruce, you and I have had quite a bit of correspondence with Carl Sims in the past 3-4 years. What's your view with regards to Carl Sims, and do you think he has found some secret source associated with artificial life?
Well, I think what he chose to do, his body of work is very extensive and include the evolving virtual creatures, those famous blocky creatures that included sort of genetic cross-dissolves. He chose, it's interesting, he did a broad range of work in the inspired artificial life genre, and then he chose one aspect of it, which was sophisticated image manipulation, to start the Sapphire plugins company. And I think he realized that would be a way forward, and it's kind of ironic because a lot of us we do kind of quote unquote normal careers for a while, and then we have more time and we have more vision, and we do artificial life, which doesn't seem to lead to commercial ventures. And Carl did the opposite way. He did all this innovative artificial life work early on, and then chose a very narrow aspect to turn into a business. And I don't think he wouldn't refer to Sapphire plugins as an artificial life tool at all. It's, but certainly inspired by his work on genetic cross-dissolves, and it's become a successful business and won awards and been a good investment of his time.
Yeah, certainly my analysis with regards to Carl Sims, and some of this comes through our communication with Rudy Rucker as well, and ultimately Steve Grand too, is that they're not currently doing work, although with Steve Grand maybe less so, that's explicitly related to the kind of artificial life discussions that we have in the Biota podcast. Now, the feedback that I've given to both Carl and obviously to Steve was that their historical relevancy and the fact that they would be greeted with a great degree of respect would probably outweigh the concerns that they had with regards to no longer being part of a broader artificial life community are able to talk on contemporary aspects of artificial life, which was always my understanding with regards to Carl Sims in particular. Although that may change. He may actually come onto a chat in the near future. But my feeling is that these people, their lack of current and contemporary discussion doesn't relate to the fact that they discovered something that they have to keep quiet or secretive. It's in fact just a discussion with regards to what we talk about currently versus their previous experiences and what their recollections of artificial life development have been. I mean, certainly my experience with Steve Grand was one of 6 months worth of kind of nurturing him into the sense that I wasn't going to start talking about contemporary papers or contemporary theories. I was actually far more fascinated with his thinking processes, 10, 15, 20 years ago, his vision with regards to certain aspects of neural networks, various low-level programming questions that were cut from what appeared in the podcast feed, various open source and those kind of contemporary methodology questions that I also cut from the feed because I didn't think they were fair to really put him into that kind of scope of discussion. So I think my feeling with regards to these folk who may not be currently appearing at Grey Thumbs or talking in what we do here, it's not that they have discovered something that they need to keep secretive. It's aspects of their life have moved on from talking about artificial life specifically, and they don't necessarily feel comfortable talking about it in a kind of contemporary setting. Does that sound right to you, Bruce?
Yeah, I think that, for example, Tom Ray, the creator of Tierra, he went on into the bioinformatics field. And I think that because there's a source of funding and it was considered a good field, still is, and slightly related to what he's done before. But I think that then, it's almost like you go on to another phase of your life and a lot of people just don't want to talk about their previous lives or work as much. I mean, I'm the kind of person who will talk endlessly about all the different phases of the work that I've done, but perhaps I'm more immodest than some of the other people who I tend to think that people in the artificial life field are fairly modest characters and not that. What would you think, Jeffrey?
Well, I think there are all kinds of characters involved for sure, and I also think that artificial life can mean different things to a person over the decades. Oftentimes somebody will do a certain body of work that contributes to the field, and then they move on to other things, as people do and should, as researchers and artists. And sometimes those other things are slightly outside of the artificial life field, and maybe they don't identify with it as much as before. So I think there are a number of reasons, for this.
So in some regard, we've personalized the discussion with regards to these specific characters, but I think what Adam was looking for was a more general discussion about, firstly, whether this idea of the secret source, this kind of quiet, hush-hush, proprietary artificial life vision already exists, whether there is already a secret source, perhaps it exists in iRobot or these kind of companies. Jeffrey, what's your thinking with regards to this kind of meta concept of the secret source? Do you think there are companies already developing advanced artificial life systems that we don't hear about?
Sure, yeah. I think there are probably some that we haven't heard about and won't hear about for a while because they're not meant to be heard about. Perhaps they're somewhere deep in a game engine or somewhere deep in some design or genetic-based systems. So I think that there are many secret sauces that are being created by many different companies.
Now, in terms of using the secret source for the kind of broader community, this was a discussion particularly with regards to Will Wright's Spore, which talked about pretty well ad nauseum through both these podcasts and chats and various other means. But the idea that artificial life developers, for example, the folks in Boston associated with Grey Thumb, can contact the local media and things like that and do spore-related events to introduce artificial life developers as being, affiliated in some regard with Spore. Do you think there are other kind of secret source-related models where general artificial life developers can benefit in the long term?
I'm not sure. Are you saying are there other... Repeat the question?
I mean, the idea of the secret source currently is the idea of some kind of closed development that we're not aware of. But do you think that in the long term, if those developments are out there and they are productive, when they do percolate to the top or when they do seek publicity, this is something that will benefit the entire artificial life community? Or do you think by the whole methodology associated with proprietary, closed source, these kind of things, that it won't be necessarily a benefit to the broader artificial life community?
Well, I guess this kind of raises the question of what is a secret sauce. I mean, if a secret sauce starts to be shared by people and then they kind of reverse engineer it, I keep thinking of Heinz ketchup or some kind of sauce, Worcestershire. I don't know. There are many secret sauces, and perhaps there are some secret sauces that are really not so secret anymore because a bunch of other cola soda makers figured out the right combination, and Pepsi, whatever.
Do you think that's analogous in artificial life, though? Do you think the same will happen if a company starts announcing their... I mean, look at Ventnor, for example, although none of us are in the conversation of doing wet artificial life. Do you think his constant press releases and his constant saturation of media with regards to his own vision of artificial life helps, you, me, or Bruce with regards to our own artificial life developments?
Oh, it certainly brings the topic out into the broader public and puts more eyes on it, which I suppose is a good thing.
And I think Spore, when it's launched on September 7th, will do that too, although Spore will be mischaracterized as an evolution or artificial life game.
And you're saying there really isn't?
Yeah, and in fact, we invited Will to come to NASA and he gave us a 2-hour demo of it in January, and he specifically said, this is not artificial life. I'd like to do artificial life sometime, but artificial life doesn't lend itself to being a playable game.
Yeah.
After some heavy prompting from Rudy Rucker.
Yes.
He volunteered that. Although I hope to have Chris Hecker on a future podcast, perhaps in a couple of weeks, to revisit the artificial life SDK for games, because obviously Chris has a very close connection with regards to the Spore development. And I think he may be able to give some insight with regards to potentials in the future for Spore-like games that actually use artificial life. So I'm looking forward to talking to Chris about that specifically. In my discussion with Adam, the secret sauce moved into a kind of restaurant analogy in terms of the way a restaurant would protect its secret sauce and the way companies have to protect their secret sauce. And certainly the discussion in my thinking led me towards the fact that there are a number of different ways that one can, run a commercial enterprise. And the thing that has always struck me is in the traditional US startup model, if such a thing actually exists, there seem to be a number of startups that keep everything completely under wraps, and you go to their website and it's a single page and you're not sure exactly what they're actually doing. And then there's a kind of extreme through to open source companies that release absolutely everything and have wikis and discussions and things of that nature. And my feeling is that there's nothing that precludes an artificial life company from being at anywhere through this spectrum. Adam's concern was that basically you can only get value in a kind of very closed proprietary system, and that, although there seemed to be openness, trademark Microsoft-related, shared views coming from Justin Lyon with regards to last week's discussion, I think there are still models that allow a degree of openness and kind of community contribution whilst still actually making money. Jeffrey, you've had connections with a number of artificial life but closed source companies in some regard, particularly obviously in the game space. What's your sense with regards to the potential of there being, artificial life companies in the future that do have a component of openness to them?
Well, I think I have a very recent experience at Linden Lab, makers of Second Life. I was there for 2 years, and one of the things that I did there was develop some artificial life-like systems. Unfortunately, they didn't get developed fully, and I left, and the company was becoming more and more involved in trying to keep the system from crashing and keep users happy and this sort of thing. And I think they're still doing that. But I think of Second Life as, it's a very open culture. Philip Rosedale, founder, was very insistent on that the whole time. Every week he would repeat himself on this philosophy. The idea of putting an artificial life system, or for that matter, any system where people can script behaviors of things in the world and their avatars' behaviors and so on, is I think there's a certain openness to that, and I think that it still remains a very fertile environment for an artificial life system to be built, that the users can create their own ecologies. I think it still has a lot of potential.
So to change the question a little bit, Bruce, if I handed you a check for $500,000 and said, create an artificial life company which could be profitable in a year or 2 years, would you set that up with a large open source component, a small open source component, completely proprietary? Would you disappear in the mountains for that period of time? What's your vision with regards to an ideal artificial life startup?
Well, I'd have to take that $500,000 to make a PowerPoint presentation to go off and raise $5 million, probably.
Right, PowerPoint. Yeah.
You get a $500,000 PowerPoint. It's hard to say because inevitably, and this goes back to experience with other what I call visionary technology movements, from whether it be robotics, machine vision, artificial intelligence, expert systems and whatnot, fuzzy logic systems from Mark Costco. All of these are powerful ideas when expressed by, say, popularizers or popularizer scientists. But when it comes down to it, carving out something that can become a business is, you practically lose all of the original visionary component to make something into a business. It's almost like there's a real separation between visionary tech and business tech. And sometimes entire fields, such as expert systems, completely died because nothing was ever carvable into a business, and perhaps the entire line of artificial intelligence as expressed by Lisp, proponents of Lisp, that completely died, or almost, it's largely gone. So, you can die on the vine as part of a visionary movement that doesn't get monetized. So I don't know what I would do with the $500,000. A friend of mine is now, who was at the Santa Fe Institute. Actually, there's an article in this month's Atlantic Monthly. He works at Dayjet, and Dayjet provides these kind of taxi services between cities for business people who can afford to hire an entire little tiny jet. And this fellow has taken his artificial life background and built optimized, algorithms to optimize X to Y to Z travel in the southeast on these tiny jets. And whether or not it's an artificial life is, certainly debatable. It's just good. It's good algorithmic optimization is what it is. It has nothing to do with artificial life. So, but in the article they tout the fact that they've got these SFI A-life brains working on it. They just happen to be, good engineers. It doesn't matter what field they came from.
Certainly when I've talked to Justin, I'm not sure whether it's appeared in these, at least the broadcasted podcast. I think it was a section that may have been cut. But the point that I've made to him is that it is actually finding these amazing niches, and I'm familiar with the Jet Company. I think they've been discussed in a number of publications, including Wired and Fast Company, and exploiting the benefits of specific implementations of artificial life systems. We have talked about this in the past, Bruce, in a somewhat more abstract sense, and I think we both came to the conclusion that there is something inherently fragile with regards to artificial life development. I mean, do you think that fragility makes it impossible for to be major breakthroughs in the kind of harsh corporate light, or do you think that there is still possibility for a secret source to emerge in those kind of conditions?
I think that, for example, one possible breakthrough could emerge if you could if you could tie the development of an artificial life secret sauce to the modeling and simulation of real biological systems, where you're able to really model what's going on in a bathtub full of catalysts, biological catalysts. And so you build this huge simulator, this grid that simulates all these NMERs and various other organic components and see what comes together. And if you're able to predict what you're going to get out of the soup or genetic recombinations and whatnot, then you have something that's a powerful tool, because you don't have to do so much bench chemistry. But is that artificial life, or is it just life simulators? It's like artificial life software, but it's very tied to modeling and objective. It's like what we do with NASA. I mean, we could do models and simulations of all kinds of abstract spacecraft, but because we focus on a real rover driving down a real crater wall on the moon, and we try to come as close as we possibly could to how it perform in lunar gravity and with slope slumping and things like that. NASA sees that, that's valuable because that could save us valuable design time and make a better mission. So we're simulating for space, but we're not doing the bigger vision of, simulating the cosmos. We're tied to something very physical and with a return on it.
I have a thought. I'm sorry, Bruce.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Tom, I have a thought about this notion of an artificial life company. Perhaps that's a contradiction in terms. And as Bruce was talking, I was thinking, what exactly is artificial life in this context? And in a way, when you build an artificial life system, you want the unexpected, right? You want novelty. You want to be surprised. And that's not what companies who are making a business want. They don't want to be surprised. However, if you have a company that's trying to solve very complex problems and you need some kind of organic algorithmic horsepower to solve certain problems, you might want to bring in an artificial life consulting firm or something along those lines to kind of add to sort of help reach a certain kind of flexibility in terms of how to deal with a complex environment or complex situation. So I was just sort of thinking about, what is artificial life, and it's sort of you expect the unexpected, and in the purest sense, I think it contradicts the notion of running a business.
Certainly. I had a couple of thoughts, but the thing that I returned to was my recent chat with Brian of Graython Boston, and his discussion of the kind of artificial life winter that many people talk about, but few can put their finger on explicitly, and his discussion with regards to the role that hype played in his own view. My concern with regards to the idea of artificial life startups, particularly closed artificial life startups, is the way in which you can, as a business that needs these kind of people or these kind of tools, how do you actively assess the short, medium, and long-term usefulness of a product that is fundamentally closed? What's your thinking with regards to this, Bruce?
Well, this goes back to, as a business person, your strategy. There's many companies that have talked about a secret sauce and not had any. They've been able to create the perception that they did. And many of them, especially going into the government sector where we are, have been able to make quite a bit of hay on that. the perception eventually is blown. I mean, I remember when there's all these rumors about this project called Ginger, which was Dean Kamen's, what turned out to be the Segway.
Oh, yes.
And it was like touted as, artificial gravity or, whatever. It was the most amazing thing. And it was kind of a letdown when it came out. It was a very impressive innovation, but it wasn't world-changing, unless you were Steve Wozniak. So there's always a problem doing it that way, and I think that the world of the 21st century, the early 21st century, is a world where things don't stay secret for long at all, and where software projects are done in very large teams. There isn't the individual inventor in the garret anymore. It's a team thing, and that's the essence of the concept of the EvoGrid, is saying you can be a lone inventor in a garret and come up with a whole bunch of really cool stuff, but chances are somebody else has already done it. You may have done a unique combination, but you're going to burn yourself out eventually. And the EvoGrid is saying, look, everything's done in teams, everything's done in grids with ontologies and schemas and XML, and it's done across platforms. And artificial life has to start graduating toward that. And the only way that makes sense is to do it in an open source manner. So in a sense, the EvoGrid moves starkly away from the model of the secret sauce A-Life project in a venture-funded firm.
What interests me about our kind of collective legacies, and the Ginger thing is perfectly timed, because I remember I used to meet with people in a bar in San Jose that was directly opposite Adobe, and around the same time I heard about Ginger, I was talking to a fellow who was a casual acquaintance of the people that ran the bar, and he used to go golfing with Don Valentine. Anyway, just talking to him for half an hour about artificial life, he said, well, I'm a futures trader. This is exactly what I need. This is exactly the technology I need. But returning to the legacy of that whole period, and I mean, Ginger's a perfect example of this, the legacy of the .com/speculative technology crash was a whole lot of reality for folks that had been living on Ginger dreams for a long period of time. And I think my concern, if we look, and warning folks, I am now going to talk about podcasting as an abstract technology, but if we look at podcasting, for example, there have been 3 companies which have gone profitable from podcasting, and all of them have squandered the resources that they got. It went 20 million, 5 million, and 1 million, and now there is no more money that can go into podcasting. It's pretty well decided that it's a static means of communicating. And the thing that strikes me, and this through my correspondence with Adam and also my thinking with regards to the discussion last week with Justin, I feel that part of my editorial duties with regards to Biota is also to represent the fact that we don't want a future with regards to pure hype associated with artificial life. We need something of real substance. And I think that's certainly my concern with regards to short-term iterations and short-term consultancies claiming to offer simulation science or artificial life services, that these need to be in some regard vetted by either industry or the community, or ideally both. And that's my primary concern with regards to the secret source model. However, in thinking about this more, I can certainly see some position where a company in the future could come out with something that is artificial life-like, and then all of us that have been in the community musing about it for 2 decades, what have you, could, easily reproduce aspects of that, or even better, hybridize it in the kind of super Coke Pepsi model in the future. So in that regard, I can see that I'm in kind of 2 minds with regards to the benefits of the secret source. However, I think certainly the legacy of what I experienced going through 2000, 2001 on to the present is that open community discussions, which in some regard is embodied in open source, is probably a better way to actually build something of value than necessarily completely closed. Jeffrey, in your experiences, does this echo with you, or do you think that there's still benefit for small consultancy companies going in and selling simulation science, artificial life services?
I think it depends entirely on what the purpose is. If it's a game like what Electronic Arts is building, they probably there's certain benefit to keeping it closed and keeping the traditional system. I mean, I think it really depends on what your goal is, because I'm still not sure what an artificial life company is. Perhaps you're referring to what's his name, Justin? Is that the one who has the Simudyne?
Yes, yeah.
About?
Justin has been very public in discussing both the strengths and the flaws of his model, and I want to say publicly that, Justin has been an amazing resource in these discussions, and I have a lot of respect for him. But the short-term aspects of what he does with Simudyne is of some concern to me as someone who develops artificial life technology. I do think the strategies and the plans, and this has come through, this is public through the discussions that went on last week, the strategies and the plans of these kind of enterprises need to take responsibility for what they're actually doing in some regard, particularly if they're interested in interfacing in a broader community. And I think these, resolve concerns that certainly have been voiced to me privately in the past week by a few folk, that folks like Justin are welcomed in the conversation, but they can't be seen as being people that are looking to cash in quick from artificial life. The three of us together have not cashed in quick with regards to our shared artificial life developments, and I think that has built something that has been more productive for more people. Certainly, Jeffrey, with regards to Gene Pool and Darwin Pond, whilst they're not completely open source, they're certainly free, and they've propagated through a lot of the methodologies that have been discussed with regards to open source technology. The difference is that the 1% or 0.1%, depending on what time of the year or what have you, haven't had the ability to download the source, but the remaining users have had the ability to get the program, run it, think about it, tinker with it, send the URL to other people, and get this kind of movement forward. So I guess you're part of this open movement associated with artificial life. And my concern in talking with people like Justin, and also certainly with regards to the chat that I had with Travis, is that there's no way for us as a community to actually talk about something specifically with regards to what they're doing, because there is this completely closed component to it.
Right. Is there something wrong with that? They're a company, and they have a certain precious sort of thing that they believe that they've invented, which they can make money on, and so they've built a company around it. I don't know the details of that particular company, but that paradigm, I think, still holds, whether they're using an artificial life technology or whether they're using some new twist on neural nets or a new abacus. I don't know, whatever. It sounds like that's a certain kind of paradigm that fits a certain sort of business goal that makes sense, and it sounds like it's very different from the kind of explorations that we've been doing.
Certainly. But I think we're all, probably Bruce in particular, are familiar with virtual reality and VRML and these kind of technologies. And depending on who you talk to, and again, depending on what time of the year it is, the questions with regards to whether virtual reality could have ever taken off in the way that it was described in the late 80s and early 90s always resolves on this idea that a certain few cashed in very quickly and the technology wasn't able to develop. Certainly talking with Brian, which came through in the chat that was put out in the feed, there was some concern that Brian had, and to a certain extent I share this concern, that artificial life is still, as we talk about it in a contemporary setting, it still has elements of fragility that could easily be used to be cashed in quick in some regard, as we may have seen with regards to virtual reality.
But the story's not over with virtual reality, is it? As far as I see it, it's just starting. It's just starting to become, the tools are just starting to become more and more available to everybody who will be able to put on their motion capture, rig up their own motion capture systems and hook up things, cobble their virtual realities together in a much more pluralistic way. I see a trend going in that direction, and I don't think that has been snuffed out.
Is that your view as well, Bruce?
Yeah, I think that the initial sort of VR or virtual worlds can do everything belief in the mid-'90s, even the early '90s with VR, immersive VR, has certainly fallen away, and you're finding some niches. The jury is still out on whether you can use virtual worlds for business meetings, how effective they are to do education and reach the public in different things. We've worked in this now for 15 years, and certainly for a nice social cocktail party fashion show environment, Second Life and Market Bazaar, Second Life has caught on. But certainly of the stable of ideas and visions for the field, that's one of 99 concepts that were initially put forward. So you really winnow it down to make it into a business. You certainly winnow it down to a very narrow scope.
So we have talked a little bit in the past about this idea of technical winters, certainly with regards to avatars and also with regards to artificial life. Do you think that these kind of ideas are always going through seasonal variances in terms of whether the technology is hot or whether the technology is simmering or hibernating? I mean, is this what you're both describing in some regard?
Well, Jeffrey, you've been through several winters and several times, right?
I think winter is a relative term, and winter is, it may be that right now avatar you'll find a lot more of the word avatar if you Google than you did before, and then perhaps than you will later. But it may resurface under a different name. So I think that virtual worlds, as people have been talking about it, will die off. But the very phenomenon itself won't go away. It'll just keep resurfacing in different manifestations. Hopefully each manifestation is more open and democratic each time. But I think the notion of a winter is relative. And sometimes it's the result of a bunch of media hype dying off, which doesn't really mean anything.
What's interesting to me is if you look back at other technologies, and the one I think that really fits the virtual world side, and this is nothing relating to artificial life, is the medium of film. In the 1890s and the early 1900s, it was early adopters, hobbyists. It was denigrated. It was clumsy. These were short, unfulfilling to some degree medium, and then grandmasters started, and then the studio system started. But one forgets that Edison had the kinetoscope, which was a VR-like thing where you put your head in and you watch 50 feet of film going through. And that was his idea. It was very similar to VR of the early 90s. And it didn't succeed, and it was, the smartest guy of his age thought that's how you would deliver film. And so virtual worlds had the parallel with immersive VR, and then they came to the screen, and then they sort of exploded when they were on the internet. And that was the era that I chronicled. But film was a real bumpy road for the longest time, and then finally in the 1920s, especially in the 30s, it became a very big business. But it went through several transitions and several generations of practitioners before it caught on.
Yeah.
And film is an interesting example because it can be equally equated to contemporary game development in some regards. In fact, it's a very interesting technical model to describe a wide variety of technologies. Ultimately, it was the commercialization of the medium that got it to catch on. Do you think that this commercialization is really critical in order for something like artificial life to catch on? And if the commercialization exists, do you think it'll come through something like game development? Do you think it'll come through some abstractive industry? Jeffrey, why don't I start with you? What's your thinking with regards to that?
I actually wonder whether artificial life can be commercialized. I'm wondering whether it can at all as such. I think that games have been commercialized, and games have an element of agentry, unpredictability, some AI, and some of the little bits and pieces of artificial life. And so maybe in that sense, it already has been commercialized, but not in the pure sense that we talk about it. I am not sure if it can be commercialized. Film could have been, because it was a science, it was a technology and an art, which was all about storytelling. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is some commercial business usage of this.
What's your thinking, Bruce?
I think that really, when it comes down to it, our species is 99% dedicated to making a living and paying the mortgage and putting food on the table. And there's a 1% left over for sort of visionary, wacky things. And I think that artificial life is solidly in that 1%. And that as things drip out of it, there may be inventions that drip out of it to put the food on the table, but they're not artificial life. And so artificial life may be like AI, it may be like religions or belief in God. It may be the unattainable, but you're ever questing for it, and creative things come out of it. There's a second point of view, which is one that I put forth a lot, that's could be hard to understand or controversial, which is that artificial life is merely nature's way of trying to get us, using us to create a new medium for itself, to propagate itself in the future. And that's a very science fiction-y idea in saying that, hey, we're just tools of nature, and A-Life is saying, okay, come on, primates, build me a new model. You know, I gotta get off this planet, or I gotta survive the heating of the sun, or we gotta go forward. And if you guys aren't going to do this, I'll have to try next time with the arthropods.
Hey, Bruce, let's call that the selfish meme. What do you say?
The selfish A-Life meme.
Yeah, it's gotta get reproduced. So we're its host.
Yeah, and that's a very, very visionary position.
But it's also one that has permeated through NASA. I mean, this is what I've heard recently in NASA interviews is, as I said initially, the Damarian vision has really struck a chord at NASA with regards to how to actually do these, unmanned Martian, landers and things like that. So, I mean, I think this vision is already slowly working its way through the likes of NASA, and then hopefully it'll hit science fiction.
It's already well established in science fiction, but you're absolutely right. Tomorrow night I'm going to have 12,000 people. I'm on stage at 10:45 p.m. at Yuri's Night at NASA.
Oh, Yuri's Night, yeah.
In a hangar, and I'm doing a presentation on asteroids and
Excellent.
comets, and why they're important to visit, and why they could be the future, the stepping stones to the solar system. And my last point of that evening, I'm going to show all kinds of great movies and simulations we've done of missions. But the last point is, if we're going to use asteroids and comets for our resources to go out and live in the solar system, we probably have to evolve a biology that is very different than Earth's biology, and we have to create creatures that can live in and on those objects. And then they are our partners, our synthetic partners into utilizing those resources. So if that's a Damarian vision, you'll be hearing it a little bit tomorrow at Yuri's Night.
Wonderful. So we've gone full circle, and it seems like if the three of us continue talking and other folks continue talking as part of Biota, the secret sauce will never truly take over in some regard. But next week we're going to be discussing the Evo Grid. So we'll have an hour of chatting with Bruce about the current directions, and we've got Roy Plotnick and Richard Gordon contributing as well currently, Bruce. There seem to be all kinds of intellectual sources coming together in the Evo Grid. So I guess you've got a week to prep for that, Bruce.
Yeah, and in fact, I've been asked to talk about the Evo Grid on Wednesday night at the Asilomar Microcomputer Workshop. So I'll be down there trying to rehearsal for Friday for the Asilomar people. This
is really why we need the Biota CDs everywhere, so you can just take a handful of Biota podcast CDs down there so people can get the Biota goodness and start contributing and start collaborating and talking. And folks, we have to wrap up. Unfortunately, we have 3 minutes left. So I'm not sure whether we've actually answered Adam's question. Maybe we'll do this at a future Saturday, 10 a.m. Pacific chat, so Adam can participate and other folks in Europe and on the East Coast can participate. If you want to contribute a topic similar to Bruce this evening with regards to the Evo Grid, get in contact, tom@noble8.com. The 4 books that you could get are on the biota.org/podcast page. Bruce, you've already pretty well outlined what you're going to be doing over the next week. Is there anything else on the horizon that you're looking forward to?
Nothing, just getting caught up on all the reading on the Biota list.
Yes, it's quite extreme for even those of us that follow it in real time. And Jeffrey, are you and Bruce going to be getting together sometime in the future to discuss all this stuff and more?
Bruce, we had talked about getting together for dinner sometime soon, so I'm still up for that.
We should, maybe even on the 24th of April.
24th of April, sounds good.
We can talk Internet Archives. A lot of projects going on there, too.
Totally, yeah. And, in fact, you'll see Brewster tomorrow night if the crowds aren't too full. Say hi to him.
Great, wonderful.
Cool.
Well, thank you both very much for participating this evening. I feel this is probably going to be like a number of the topics that we've already discussed, an ongoing topic of conversation as more people join the conversation. The next Biota Live will be next Friday at 8 p.m. Pacific when we'll be discussing Bruce's Evo Grid. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.